My name is Alara. Or, at least, that's the name I've reclaimed. For a long time, I was just a reflection, a shadow living in someone else's light. 7 years ago, I was a painter. My world was the scent of turpentine and linseed oil, the rough texture of canvas under my fingertips, and the quiet, soul-deep satisfaction of capturing the way the afternoon sun spilled through the leaves of the willow trees in my small hometown of Silver Creek. My life was my own, a patchwork of vibrant color and quiet solitude. I had a small studio apartment above a bakery, where the smell of fresh bread would wake me each morning. It was a simple existence, but it was authentic, and it was mine. That was before I met Julian. He came into my life like a sudden, brilliant sunrise, chasing away the familiar, gentle hues I was so accustomed to. He was a corporate litigator, sharp and ambitious, with a smile that could disarm armies, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only masterpiece he had ever seen. He saw my paintings not just as art, but as windows into my soul. "You capture light in a way I've never seen," he told me on our first date, his eyes tracing the brushstrokes on a canvas in my studio. "It's like you paint not what you see, but what you feel." We fell in love with the swift, dizzying momentum of a summer storm. He was my opposite in every way, structured where I was fluid, pragmatic where I was dreamy, but it felt like we completed each other. He brought order to my beautiful chaos, and I brought color to his monochrome world of contracts and depositions. Within a year, we were married. I packed away my canvases and my easel, believing I was trading them for a different, more brilliant kind of art, the art of building a life with the man I loved. The turn came on a cool autumn evening, the air crisp with the promise of change. We were sharing a bottle of wine in our cozy Silver Creek apartment. Julian, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally turned to me, his eyes gleaming with an intensity one hadn't seen before. He'd received an offer from Vanguard Law, one of the most prestigious firms in the country, located in the sprawling metropolis of Crestwood. "It's the partner track, Alara," he said, his voice a low, excited hum. "This is everything I've worked for. A once-in-a-lifetime shot." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride for him. But beneath the pride, a cold tendril of anxiety snaked its way around my ribs. Crestwood was a world away from Silver Creek, a city of steel and glass, not willows and water. My art was rooted in the soil of my home. What would I paint there? But then I looked at his face, so full of hope and ambition, and the love I felt for him eclipsed my fear. I would find new light to paint. I would find a new home in him. We moved into a sprawling, modern house in a manicured Crestwood suburb. It was beautiful, with high ceilings and vast windows that looked out onto a perfectly landscaped lawn. It felt less like a home and more like a magazine spread. Initially, the novelty was an adventure. But as the boxes were unpacked and the stark reality of our new life began to settle in, a new side of Julian emerged, one I didn't recognize. One afternoon, I was struggling to arrange our books on the towering, built-in shelves of the living room. Boxes were still scattered, creating a landscape of cardboard chaos. Julian came home from work, his jaw tight. He surveyed the room, and his gaze, which once held such warmth, was now sharp and critical. "Is this all you've done today?" he asked, his voice clipped. "I can't think in this mess. You need to work faster. I can't live like this." I was stunned into silence. I had spent the day searching for art supply stores and potential studio spaces, trying to find a foothold for myself in this new city. I mumbled an apology, attributing his sharpness to the immense pressure of his new job. But it was the first crack in the beautiful facade of our life, and soon more would appear. My search for a studio proved fruitless. The rents were astronomical, and every space felt cold and sterile. When I talked about trying to find part-time work, maybe teaching art classes, or even going back to my old love of landscape photography, Julian was dismissive. "Alara, that's a hobby," he said, not unkindly, but with an air of finality. "Your focus needs to be here, on the house. On us. I need this place to be a sanctuary, a perfect refuge from the battles I fight every day." His words, cloaked in the language of partnership, were a command. "Your job," he said one evening after I'd served him a slightly overcooked salmon, "is to make everything perfect for me. That's how you can support my career. That's your contribution." I looked at him, searching for the man who had loved the beautiful chaos of my studio, the man who had cherished my independent spirit. He was gone, replaced by the stranger who saw me not as a partner, but as a high-end housekeeper. I nodded, holding back a flood of tears. I would try. For him. For us. I would try to be perfect. The months bled into years. My life, once a vibrant canvas, was now a sterile, repetitive chore list. I learned to anticipate Julian's moods, to read the tension in his shoulders when he walked through the door. I walked on eggshells, my own desires and dreams packed away as neatly as his folded shirts. His demands grew in proportion to his success. The house had to be immaculate. His meals had to be gourmet. His social life, which I was expected to manage, had to be flawless. I once gently suggested we hire a housekeeper, just for a few hours a week, to free up some of my time. His reaction was volcanic. "Are you kidding me? You want to waste my money because you can't handle your one job," he'd roared, his face turning a blotchy red. "Your place is here. Doing this. What else do you even do all day?" So I did it all. I faded into the background of his spectacular life. I became a ghost in my own home, my only purpose to polish the surfaces of his world until they gleamed. I even managed his professional social media, crafting a narrative of a powerful, brilliant lawyer supported by his adoring, perfectly content wife. I posted photos of us at charity galas, his arm possessively around my waist, both of us smiling for the camera. We were the perfect couple. It was the most heartbreaking piece of fiction I had ever created. One evening, I was in the kitchen, carefully plating a lemon and herb-roasted chicken. I heard the front door slam, a sound that always sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Julian stormed into the kitchen, his face a thundercloud. He'd had a bad day in court. I knew the signs. "Dinner ready?" he grunted, loosening his tie. "Almost," I said softly. "Just a few more minutes." "A few more minutes?" he sneered. "I'm starving. I work my ass off all day and I can't even come home to a hot meal. Just shut up and get my food on the table." My hands trembled as I served him. He took one bite of the chicken, chewed for a moment, and then his face contorted in disgust. "This is dry," he spat, and with a sudden, violent gesture, he shoved the plate off the table. It hit the tiled floor with a sickening crash, shattering into a dozen pieces, the chicken and roasted vegetables skittering across the pristine white surface. "Clean it up," he ordered, his voice dangerously low, before turning and stalking out of the room. I stood there for a long moment, the scent of lemon and shattered dreams hanging in the air. Then slowly, I sank to my knees. I began to gather the broken shards of porcelain, my movements mechanical. A single, hot tear threatened to fall, but I blinked it back with practiced efficiency. Crying was not on the schedule. It would only make my eyes puffy, and Julian hated it when I looked tired. As I picked up a piece of the plate, I saw my own distorted reflection, in its curved surface a woman on her knees, piecing together the wreckage of a life that was no longer her own. I didn't recognize her at all. The next day, a fragile, desperate hope propelled me. I would fix this. I would remind him of the love we once had. I would make him the perfect meal, a peace offering. I decided on his absolute favorite, a rich, creamy seafood bisque that took hours to prepare, followed by his preferred steak. I spent the entire day in the kitchen, a willing prisoner to my own last-ditch effort. As evening approached, I set the table with our best china and silverware. The bisque was simmering, its fragrant aroma filling the house. As I lit the candles, a wave of pure dread washed over me. The bread. I had forgotten to buy the fresh sourdough he loved to dip in his soup. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was such a small thing, but in Julian's world, small imperfections were chasms. Just then, he walked in, loosening his silk tie. Something smells good, he said, a rare note of approval in his voice. It's coming right up, I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. I ladled the steaming bisque into a bowl and placed it before him. He sat down, unfolded his napkin, and then his eyes scanned the table. They stopped. His brow furrowed. Where's the bread? He asked, his voice flat. I'm so sorry, Julian, I forgot to. He didn't let me finish. The change was instantaneous. His face darkened, the brief flicker of warmth extinguished. You forgot? Are you really this incompetent? He bellowed, his voice echoing in the cavernous dining room. And then, with a swift, brutal sweep of his arm, he sent the bowl flying. It happened in slow motion. The heavy ceramic arced through the air, and the hot, creamy bisque splashed across the lower half of my leg. A sharp, searing pain shot up from my calf, and a strangled cry escaped my lips. I stumbled back, clutching my leg, the burn already beginning to blister. Julian looked down at me, his expression not of concern, but of pure contempt. God, you're so clumsy, he muttered, stepping around the mess. Now look what you've done. He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the searing pain in my leg and the icy shards of a much deeper realization in my heart. As I sobbed, sinking to the floor amidst the spilt soup, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't stress. This was my life. How had I let it get this bad? When had I traded my canvases and my freedom for this torment? The next morning, the physical pain in my leg was a dull throb, but the pain in my soul had sharpened into a point of pure, cold clarity. I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. As Julian knotted his tie in front of the mirror, preparing to go out and conquer his world, I stood in the doorway. Julian, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. He stopped, his hands frozen on his tie. He turned to face me, and a slow, chilling grin spread across his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. A divorce, he chuckled, a sound devoid of any humor. Listen to me very carefully, Alara. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. If you try to leave me, I will ruin you. I'll paint you as an unstable, hysterical woman to every person we know. You'll leave this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. No money, no friends, no reputation. You'll end up on the streets, and everyone will say you deserved it. His words were venomous, designed to paralyze me with fear. And they did. My heart felt like a trapped bird beating against my ribs. But as I looked at his smug, threatening face, something else ignited within me, not courage, not yet, but a stubborn spark of survival. I knew I couldn't walk out that day. He was right. He had all the power. But I also knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not stay. That day, my mission changed. I would no longer try to be the perfect wife. I would become the perfect archivist of my own pain. If I was going to get free, I needed to build a fortress of evidence, brick by painful brick. As Julian's career continued its meteoric rise, I began my secret life. While he was winning cases and earning accolades, I was documenting the dark reality of our home. I bought a small, discreet digital recorder. I saved every venomous text message. I photographed the bruises that sometimes appeared on my arms from where he'd gripped me too tightly. Each recording, each photo, was a whisper of truth in a house built on lies. He won a particularly high-profile case and decided to host a celebratory party at our home. I want everything perfect, he'd instructed. And you will make it all from scratch. No caterers. For a week, I was a whirlwind of motion cleaning, polishing, planning a complex menu. I was a machine running on fumes and fear. By the evening of the party, I was so exhausted my bones ached. Julian came home early, a rare occurrence. He was holding a bottle of expensive Chardonnay. You look exhausted, he said, his voice unusually gentle. He poured 2 glasses. Here. You've earned this. The gesture was so out of character that it should have been a warning. But I was too tired, too desperate for a sliver of kindness. I took the glass. The wine tasted slightly off, with a bitter, metallic undertone, but I chalked it up to my fatigue. I took a few sips, noticing that Julian barely touched his own glass. "Go get changed," he said, his eyes scanning my simple dress. "The guests will be here soon." I nodded and headed upstairs. A wave of dizziness washed over me as I climbed the steps. By the time I reached our bedroom, the world was tilting violently. The floor seemed to rush up to meet me, and as I collapsed onto the bed, consciousness frayed and then dissolved into blackness. When I awoke, bright, unforgiving sunlight was streaming through the windows. My head throbbed with a chemical hangover unlike any I'd ever known. Confused and groggy, I made my way downstairs. I found Julian's mother, Eleanor, in the kitchen, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. "Well, well. Look who's finally decided to grace us with her presence," she sneered, her voice like ice chips. "You should be ashamed of yourself." My mind was a fog. What happened? What happened?" Her voice rose, sharp with indignation. "You got disgustingly drunk and made a complete fool of my son in front of his partners, his clients, everyone who matters. He had to call me at 10 o'clock at night to come and play hostess because his wife was passed out upstairs like a common drunk." Nausea churned in my stomach. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's not possible. I only had one glass of wine." "Oh, spare me the pathetic excuses," Eleanor snapped. "I always knew you weren't good enough for him. A fragile, flighty artist. Now the whole city sees what a mess you truly are." As she continued her tirade, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The strange-tasting wine, Julian barely drinking his, the sudden, overwhelming dizziness. "He drugged me," I murmured, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After Eleanor swept out of the house, leaving a trail of righteous fury in her wake, I sat at the cold, granite kitchen island. This was his plan. It wasn't just about controlling me within the walls of our home. It was about systematically destroying my credibility in the outside world. If I left him now, who would believe the word of a hysterical, alcoholic woman against that of the brilliant, charming Julian Croft? That day, the spark of survival within me roared into a flame of cold, calculated fury. I went out and bought a new phone, a simple, prepaid one, and hid it in a hollowed-out book in my old, dusty art trunk. This phone became my silent witness. I began to record everything: his drunken rants when he came home late, his late-night orders to scrub the kitchen floors, every threat, every insult, every moment of his casual cruelty. One recording was particularly painful. It was my birthday. Clinging to a pathetic sliver of hope, I had made a small cake and prepared a quiet dinner for two. I pressed record on my hidden phone just as he stumbled through the door, reeking of whiskey. "What's all this crap?" he slurred, gesturing at the table. "It's my birthday, Julian. I thought we could." He let out a harsh, cruel laugh. "Your birthday? Who gives a damn? Look at you. You're pathetic. You don't deserve a celebration." He continued to rant, his words sloshing over me like acid, before he swept the two plates and the small cake off the table. The sound of it all crashing to the floor was the only sound in the room, faithfully captured by my phone. Another night, he woke me at 2 a.m., shaking me roughly. "Get up," he hissed, his breath hot on my face. "The house is a pigsty. Clean it. Now." For 3 hours, I scrubbed and polished while he followed me from room to room, pointing out imagined specks of dust, his voice a relentless, grating critique. And through it all, my phone recorded, a silent testament to my exhaustion and his sadism. These recordings became my secret arsenal, a digital archive of my suffering and my eventual path to freedom. The whispers and disdainful looks from Julian's circle of friends became more frequent. I was the unstable wife, the embarrassment. Yet I played my part, the meek, devoted spouse, all while secretly building my case, my escape route. Our wedding anniversary approached. A part of me, the foolish, hopeful part one couldn't seem to kill, thought maybe, just maybe, he would be different. But I knew better. He came home that evening with a brilliant, false smile. "I've booked us a table at La Toile," he announced, naming the most exclusive and expensive restaurant in Crestwood. A proper celebration. I was wary, but I agreed. Before we left, he handed me a tall glass of iced lemonade. "I made it myself," he said. A little pre-celebration toast. His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright. A siren of warning wailed in my gut. I raised the glass to my lips, pretending to take a long sip. When he turned to answer his phone, I quickly and quietly poured the contents into a large potted fern by the window. In the car, a strange, creeping drowsiness began to settle over me anyway. Perhaps he'd put something in the air vents, or perhaps the sheer, unrelenting stress was finally taking its physical toll. I fought to keep my eyelids from drooping, my head feeling like it was filled with cotton. The next thing I knew, the car had stopped, and I was being half-dragged, half-pushed out onto a cracked pavement. Through a blurry haze, I saw Julian looking down at me, his face a mask of pure scorn. "This is where you belong, Alara." With the rest of the trash, he sneered. He threw my purse out of the car, and it landed in a grimy puddle nearby. Then he got back in the car and drove away, the red of his taillights disappearing into the oppressive darkness of a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The distant, rhythmic pop-pop-pop of what sounded unnervingly like gunshots echoed in the night air. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to paralyze me. But then I saw a flickering neon sign a block away, spelling out 24/7 Mart. It was a beacon. My heels clattered on the broken sidewalk as I ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I burst through the door of the convenience store, startling the young woman behind the counter. "Please," I gasped, my voice trembling. "My name is Alara. I need help. Can I use your phone?" The clerk, whose name tag read Grace, looked at my expensive dress, my disheveled state, and the sheer terror in my eyes. Her expression softened from suspicion to concern. Without a word, she walked to the door and locked it, creating a small, safe bubble for us in the middle of the hostile night. She handed me her cell phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my one true friend in the city, Chloe. "Chloe? It's me. Alara? Where are you? You sound awful." "Julian, he left me. Somewhere downtown. I don't know where I am." I rattled off the name of the convenience store. "Stay right there," Chloe said, her voice a lifeline of calm and fury. "Don't move. I'm on my way." As I waited, Grace made me a cup of hot tea. Her quiet, unassuming kindness was a balm to my shattered nerves. "You might have saved my life tonight," I told her, my voice thick with emotion. When Chloe's headlights cut through the darkness, I turned to Grace, fumbling with the clasp of a silver locket my grandmother had given me, the only piece of my old life I still wore. "Please take this." She gently pushed my hand away. "You keep that, honey," she said, her voice soft. "You're going to need reminders of who you were, to become who you're meant to be. Your new life starts tonight. You're stronger than you think." Tears streamed down my face as I hugged her, a stranger who had shown me more humanity in 20 minutes than my husband had in years. I hurried out to Chloe's car, sliding into the passenger seat. As we sped away from the flickering neon sign, Chloe looked at me, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Alara," she said, her voice steel. "This is it. It's over. It's time you fought back." "How, Chloe?" I whispered, the weight of my helplessness crushing me. "He has all the power, all the connections." "Not all of them," Chloe said, a grim determination in her eyes. "My cousin is a producer for The Morning Perspective. It's time everyone heard the real story of Crestwood's golden couple." The days that followed were a blur. Chloe's cousin, moved by my story, fast-tracked me onto the show. I found myself in a brightly lit studio, the sympathetic face of the host, a woman named Diana, looking at me with genuine concern. "Alara, thank you for your courage in being here," she said as the cameras rolled. "Please, tell us your story." I took a deep breath, the microphone feeling cold in my hand. And I spoke. I told them everything. The move, the isolation, the slow, insidious erosion of my soul. I spoke of the drugged wine, the staged humiliation, and the final, terrifying act of abandonment. The live studio audience was silent, their faces a mixture of shock and compassion. "Why did you feel you had to speak out now?" Diana asked gently. "Because silence is a sanctuary for abusers," I said, a strength I didn't know I possessed surging through my voice. And I know there are so many other women and men living in that same silent fear, thinking they are alone. I want them to know they are not. When the show ended, my phone, which Chloe had retrieved from my purse, lit up with a deluge of messages. My story had struck a national chord. But amidst the hundreds of messages of support, one text made my blood run cold. It was from Julian. "You will regret this for the rest of your miserable life, you lying bitch. I am going to destroy you." Shaking, I showed the text to Chloe. She didn't flinch. Her eyes blazed. "He's an arrogant fool," she said. "He just handed us the nail for his own coffin." Leaving the studio, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. A war was coming, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was armed for battle. The fallout was immediate. My story became a maelstrom of interviews, legal consultations, and calls from women's advocacy groups. Julian's threats continued, each one a desperate, angry volley into the void, but with each one, my resolve hardened. One morning, I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this Alara Croft?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "It is," I replied. "My name is Alana Vance. I'm a senior partner at Vance and Sterling, a family law firm. I saw your interview. I want to represent you." "I appreciate that," I said, my heart sinking a little, "but there's no way I can afford a lawyer like you." "You misunderstand," Alana said, her voice firm. "We would be honored to represent you pro bono. My firm has been looking for an opportunity to challenge Julian Croft in court for a very long time. It turns out you're not the only person whose life he's tried to ruin." It emerged that Julian had made a long list of enemies throughout his ruthless career. Alana's firm had represented several smaller companies he had crushed with unethical, borderline illegal tactics. My case, she explained, was their chance not only to help me, but to finally hold him accountable. The next day, I sat in a sleek conference room, surrounded by Alana and her team. I handed over my secret weapon, the hidden phone, and a USB drive containing every recording, every text message, every photograph. As Alana listened to the recording of my disastrous birthday, her professional composure cracked, her eyes widening in disbelief and then hardening with resolve. "This is it, Alara," she said, her voice low and fierce. "This is more than enough. With this, we won't just win your divorce. We might just get him disbarred." As the divorce proceedings began, Julian's legal team came out swinging. They painted me as a vindictive, unstable, alcoholic spouse, lashing out because he was leaving her. His lawyer stood before the judge and declared, "Mrs. Croft has a history of erratic behavior and substance abuse. These wild accusations are nothing more than a desperate, calculated smear campaign by a scorned woman trying to extort a good man." The most painful part was watching Eleanor take the stand. With tears in her eyes, she recounted the night of the party, describing my disgraceful behavior. "She was an embarrassment," she cried, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "My son has suffered so much trying to protect her, to manage her issues." I felt sick, but Alana placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Breathe," she whispered. "Our turn is coming." And when it came, Alana was a force of nature. She played the recordings for the court. The air in the room grew thick and still as Julian's voice, slurred and cruel, filled the space, ordering me to clean, mocking my birthday. She displayed his threatening texts on a large screen. Then, she called Chloe to the stand, who calmly recounted receiving my terrified call and finding me after Julian had abandoned me. She called Grace, the convenience store clerk, whose quiet, powerful testimony about my state of terror and her decision to lock the door for my safety resonated deeply with the judge. With each piece of evidence, Julian's face grew redder, his composure fraying at the edges. The final, irrefutable blow came when Alana presented a toxicology report. "Your Honor," she announced, her voice ringing with confidence, "we had a forensic analysis conducted on a sample of Mrs. Croft's hair. The results show a significant presence of a powerful sedative, consistent with the dates she claims Mr. Croft drugged her." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Julian leaped to his feet. "That's a lie. She's lying. You can't trust any of this." "Mr. Croft, control yourself or I will hold you in contempt," the judge snapped, his voice like thunder. The atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The doubt had evaporated, replaced by shock and a quiet, simmering anger. Even some of Julian's own colleagues in the gallery looked at him with expressions of dawning horror. The judge called for a recess. As we filed out, I caught Julian's eye. For the first time since I had met him, I saw genuine fear. When we returned for the verdict, the room was electric with tension. The judge, a stern-faced man named Harris, looked down from his bench. After a thorough review of the extensive and, frankly, deeply disturbing evidence presented, he began, his voice grave, "This court rules unequivocally in favor of Mrs. Alara Croft." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding for 7 years. The judge continued, his words a hammer striking down the edifice of Julian's life. "Mr. Julian Croft is ordered to pay significant alimony and damages for emotional distress and to forfeit 75% of all marital assets. Furthermore, he is to cover all of Mrs. Croft's legal fees." Julian exploded. "This is a travesty. I'll appeal. I'll fight this to the Supreme Court." The judge simply looked at him over his glasses. "Given the evidence, Mr. Croft, I'd say you're lucky you are not facing criminal charges. I suggest you sit down and be silent." He then looked at me, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Croft, this court is also granting a permanent restraining order. Mr. Croft is to have no contact with you by any means and must remain at least 500 yards from your person and your residence at all times." Tears, this time of pure, unadulterated relief, streamed down my face. It was over. I was free. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of the cold, cavernous house and into a small, sun-drenched apartment in a quieter part of the city. I bought new canvases, new paints, and set up a small easel by the window. I could breathe again. But Julian's ghost still lingered. He had mutual acquaintances call me, conveying veiled threats. I would sometimes see his car parked down the street from my building, a silent, menacing presence. One evening, Chloe was over for coffee. "He's not going to stop, is he?" she said, her brow furrowed with worry. A slow, steady resolve settled over me. "No," I said. "He won't. So I have to." He had, in his arrogance, never changed the passwords to the professional blog and LinkedIn profile I had so meticulously curated for him. That night, I logged in. I systematically dismantled the fiction I had helped create. I posted transcripts of the court proceedings. I uploaded the audio files of his abuse. I wrote, in my own words, the true story behind the smiling photos. The public and professional detonation was swift and absolute. His firm, Vanguard Law, issued a statement distancing themselves from him, and he was forced to resign. Clients abandoned him in droves. His reputation, the thing he valued above all else, was left in smoldering ruins. Enraged, he came to my apartment, violating the restraining order. He stood on the street below my window, screaming threats. I calmly recorded him with my phone, and then I called the police. As they led him away in handcuffs, his face a mask of impotent fury, I saw the last vestiges of the man I once loved crumble into dust, destroyed by the weight of his own monstrous pride. In the months that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Julian had moved to another state to try and start over, but his name was now infamous, his past a shadow he couldn't outrun. As for me, my ordeal had an unexpected outcome. A local organization, the Haven Project, which provides support and resources for women escaping abusive situations, reached out. They offered me a position as a peer counselor and advocate. I accepted without hesitation. A year later, I stood in a circle of women in a brightly lit room at the Haven Project. Their faces were etched with stories similar to my own. As I shared my journey, I saw flickers of recognition, of pain, and, most importantly, of hope in their eyes. This was my new art form, not capturing light on a canvas, but helping to reignite it in souls that had been plunged into darkness. My work became my calling. I met a young woman named Eden, whose story of a controlling husband and a life of profound isolation mirrored my own so closely it made my heart ache. Over weeks, we worked together, building a safety plan, bolstering her confidence. The day she finally walked out, the look of terrified relief on her face was a reflection of my own past. "You saved my life," she whispered, hugging me tightly. In healing her, I was healing a part of myself. The Haven Project's work gained recognition, and I was invited to speak publicly. "Ilara, your story can move mountains," Chloe had urged me. My first engagement was at a local university. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of young faces, a strange calm settled over me. "My name is Ilara," I began, my voice clear and strong. "And this is my story of survival." The impact was palpable. My pain had been transmuted into power. Speaking engagements led to a TEDx talk, which led to a book deal. Writing my story was excruciating, forcing me to walk back through the darkest corridors of my memory. But it was also profoundly therapeutic. The day The Unfolding Light was published was surreal. It became a bestseller. During a national television interview, the host asked me a final question. "Looking back, do you have any regrets?" I paused, thinking of the lost years, the fear, the pain. Then I thought of Eden, of the women at the shelter, of the letters I received from readers around the world. "I regret every moment I spent living in fear," I answered, my gaze steady. "But I don't regret the path that has led me here. Every scar has taught me a lesson about strength. Every tear watered the seeds of empathy. The woman who once lived in silence now speaks for those who have no voice. I wouldn't change my past because my story, I've come to realize, is still unfolding. And its true purpose was never just about my own freedom. It was about helping others find the courage to begin writing their own."